Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. 2, because I'm a fan of punk music. And 3, it's just more fun, right? If this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. Please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Dorian Stone, who is Grammarly Business's General Manager. Hey, Dorian, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Adrian, thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
You're very welcome. Now, so Dorian, some people might not know Grammarly. They might not know Grammarly Business. They might not even know you. So can you tell us a bit about all of those things?
Sure. I'm happy to. I guess the first thing, let me give you a little bit of my background. I have spent almost all aspects of my career in trying to take what exists and improve it. From being the second employee at a startup, before startups were cool, when printers only printed black and white, to being a Peace Corps volunteer and then a director trying to help start small businesses and enable rural areas of Latin America to develop small businesses in their communities. Nice. To spending over a decade at McKinsey, a global consulting firm, where I spent time co-founding the customer experience practice, where I spent time in the social sector, trying to give back and help think about bringing private sector solutions to help those in underprivileged situations and solve systemic issues around poverty using the private sector's best practices. And a lot actually of customer experience thinking and working back from the customer was actually the source of a lot of those solutions. And then subsequently at a company, customer experience leader called Medallia that went public in 2019 and served some of the largest enterprises in the world on their customer experience agendas. And so that all of that led up to joining Grammarly and now serving as Grammarly's general manager of Grammarly Business. And I'm happy to talk a little bit about Grammarly and Grammarly Business and give your listeners a bit of info if that would help.
Yeah, no, perfect. Before we do that, I mean, because I know personally about Grammarly, because I've been a user of Grammarly for a while now. I mean, because I got put onto it by somebody else who's a Forbes contributor, as I am, and I must say, it's been a really useful and also ever evolving tool, as it were, that's helped me in my kind of writing process, because it helps me kind of like check grammar, not just kind of spelling, but grammar, but also like passive versus active prose, overuse of certain words, punctuation, all that type of stuff. So I know personally that I've found it kind of really useful. So I write something and then I cut and paste it and drop it into kind of Grammarly, and then it just tells me after all the kind of huge amounts of passive prose that I'm using, and then I kind of learn eventually, and I'm getting better at it. So I think that's kind of brilliant. So when your colleagues kind of told me about Grammarly Business, I was like, what? There's a business thing as well? That's cool. I thought it was just a personal tool. And then I was intrigued and wanted to learn more about kind of what you're doing and how you're kind of applying Grammarly Business, particularly to customer service.
Sure.
Customer support. So tell me kind of a little bit about kind of Grammarly Business and sort of how long it's been around and where it came about.
Happy to. So let me start by piggybacking on what you just described in your experience with Grammarly. All the elements of how Grammarly's helped you, all are on the back of the mission of Grammarly, which is to improve lives by improving communication.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're experiencing is a platform that is a writing assistant, AI-powered writing assistant, that currently, just like you, there are 30 million other people that are using every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes, and this is where we kind of talk about Grammarly Business, 30,000 different teams are using the Grammarly platform through Grammarly Business to work together more effectively.
Right.
Grammarly Business is built on top of Grammarly's platform. We can talk more about that platform.
Mm-hmm.
And it is designed to take all the best of what we do to serve individuals, and then on top of that, add feature functionality, enterprise grade components to be able to support organizations at the team, department, and entire company level. And we do serve all types of organizations.
Mm-hmm.
We do serve all size organizations, and we do serve them in every way, in terms of a small team that wants to start with Grammarly all the way to sort of wall-to-wall deployment, so that every employee is receiving the benefits. And I can talk a little bit about the customer support in a second. And then,
Well, what I was going to say, Dorian,
Yeah.
if I may, just to jump in a little bit, is I wanted to back up a little bit, and you talk about this idea about better the mission, right? Kind of better writing leads to better communication, better outcomes, etc. But I wanted to zoom in on that and ask about: do you have a little insight into kind of the impact that poor writing or ineffective communications has on service and experience and overall results? Because I know that Gartner has been quoted as, or has reported that, says that 87% of companies are invested in communication skills for their team. So if that's true, and I have no reason to think that Gartner are wrong, then there has to be a problem if you've got the mass of companies that are investing in these kind of tools.
So I'm not surprised to hear that Gartner's reported that.
Right.
Ineffective communication is one of the silent killers of business performance. It is a huge cost, impacting organizations. Specifically, and getting it right is actually a huge boost to organizational performance, core business outcomes. In a customer support setting, for example, as you asked, think about how much rework happens in those organizations. Think about how much inconsistency happens in those organizations that deteriorates not just the experience in the moment, but the overall brand experience over time, right? And across interactions. All those investments are deteriorated every time communication with a customer, for example, is not up to snuff, and is not done consistently from one agent to the next, or from one period to the next with the same customer. What we find with Grammarly Business is huge upside in the productivity of customer support functions when Grammarly is put in place to help them with their communication. And the kinds of things that we see are double-digit increases in CSAT or NPS, in addition to double-digit increases in productivity. There's not a trade-off, and I think that's a pretty big deal. You get the best of both. And that's an example from customer support, where we see tickets moving faster, better customer experience, and you see it in other functions as well. But since you asked about customer support, I'll just start there. We've seen this multiple times in multiple different types of industries, multiple places, working very closely with our customers. It's very exciting to see the impact that effective communication has on hard business metrics.
Nice. I mean, I like the idea that you see a bump in your CSAT, but you also see a bump in productivity. I mean, I'm wondering, is it because the bump in productivity, or the flow through, is that because the technology encourages you to, because it improves your communication skills, it improves clarity, and therefore you don't end up having to do the back and forth, what did you mean by that, et cetera, and that's where you get one of the big areas that you get productivity improvements.
Yeah, the productivity improvements with increased quality and better customer experience come from three primary factors.
Okay.
The first is that the Grammarly platform, as you experienced, it works in real time, and it works in the application you're working in, right? So it's a very seamless experience. That's the first one. So it's a frictionless way of getting better versus having a trade-off, right? The second is that it's not just about correctness, but it is, as you suggested, it's also about clarity, engagement, and delivery. And we focus on all of that in order to improve in real time as someone's writing, communicating, the quality and the effectiveness of that communication. Right. So that's the second one. And then the third, and particularly with Grammarly Business, is there are style guides as well as analytics that can be put in place to then ensure that specific things to that business organization, whether it be brand terms, whether it be jargon they want to avoid, they know that's in the DNA, but the customers don't understand. There's those specific rules that are specific to that company that then also get layered in. And when you have all three of those put together, you're able to, in a frictionless way, ensure high quality and effectiveness of any given communication and have it stay on point across time from a consistency standpoint. So that's what drives it. Now, let me just, I'll pause there and see if.
Well, yeah, no, because I think my next question was like, I know how it works for me. I know how I use it. So I sort of, if you like, it's a bit like I write it's like I write my own little kind of Faraday cage, as it were. So I sit there and I go blah, 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 bang it all out in a in a Word document or old school word processor, as it were, and then I cut and paste it in, and then go set the parameters and go ta-da, and then deal with all the queries, and then I kind of go back, and that's it's I guess in my experience, my process is a very back way of working, but you're talking about, and the business side of things, it's working very much in real time. And so when you say real time, I'd be interested to understand how that works in sort of practice.
Sure.
And is it that an agent just goes, they get a ticket or something that comes in and it goes, oh, look, and then they start writing, and just before they send, Grammarly does its magic and goes, well, you might think about this or you might think about that? Or is it actually quicker than that, and it's like almost every word or every sentence? How does, or can you set that cadence, as it were?
Sure. So the Grammarly's writing assistance is happening as that agent is writing in the application they're using.
Right.
So I'm a support rep. I log into Zendesk or Salesforce, what have you. Right? I am starting to do my work in that application, and whichever application it is, and whether or not I then go over to, say, Google Docs to find maybe some templated thing that my manager wants me to use, and I put that in, but we're able to integrate with it in real time with all those different applications. So wherever the agent is, we are. And as the agent is writing, not when they're done, they can also do a check when they're done if they like, but as they're writing, we are providing suggestions. Right. So as let's say you go from one sentence to two sentences, we're providing deeper and richer suggestions around the actual structure of the sentence to make sure that the main point is captured. The delivery to make sure it's actually engaging and has the right tone. And we're able to flag things like, is that tone on or off brand? Is that term on or off brand in Grammarly Business, unlike an individual user, because we have those guides and parameters configurable for the business. So now the manager of the support rep can feel very confident that I'm going to be on brand, on tone, and effective in the quality of my communication. And I'm going to do all that in the context of the work exactly as I would normally do it. Even if Grammarly weren't there, we're just making it better. There's no additionals. And so that's really, there's a lot of magic to that. And the second thing that I'd say, Adrian, is you had mentioned earlier that you learn from it and you're learning from your mistakes. And in Grammarly Business, we've worked with our clients. We actually see faster and faster speed of the actual individual support rep, for example, handling a ticket and making fewer and fewer mistakes and getting fewer suggestions over time because they're getting better and learning in real time.
Right.
And that's pretty powerful. So when you look at the productivity, it's a frictionless way of improving quality, the way that the technology works. The agent actually learns to actually make fewer mistakes over time, given the way that technology interacts with them to make the writing suggestions. And on top of that, as we talked about before, because the effectiveness of the communication is going up in terms of not just correctness, but quality and clarity and engagement delivery, we see that work gets done right the first time. So there's less rework and less having to work a ticket the second time over. There's less customer frustration. Customers actually appreciate it better. And so you get this win-win of improved productivity and improved customer experience. And by the way, the agent's getting better through that process, and you didn't have to take anybody off the floor. It's actually pretty magical.
Nice.
And frankly, the impact of effective communication is one of the most grossly underestimated costs and opportunities to businesses. And the metrics that we see on the hard business outcomes, when you look at this magic, and then you literally look at the metrics that are coming out, are huge. There's some estimates that ineffective communication is costing, and this is the US alone,
right,
$400 billion in productivity.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Really? Wow.
But
that's just kind of like misunderstanding, wasted time, all that type of stuff.
Rework, frustration. I mean, think about having to repeat yourself twice.
Yeah.
It's a waste of time. But think about what's worse, which is not repeating yourself until after somebody did a bunch of work that wasn't actually on target because they misunderstood the first message, or after the downside of someone being frustrated. Imagine that's a customer, imagine it's a fellow employee, imagine it's a manager to their team. You know, these costs add up, and you don't find them anywhere on the P&L, but they severely and negatively impact the P&L when ineffective communication is allowed to exist inside an organization. And unfortunately, communication's hard. This is not an easy problem. And so it's costing, as I said before, you know, upwards of 400 billion, or more than 400 billion probably today, $400 billion to US companies alone. And it's an item that you won't find on a single P&L.
Wow. Yeah. And so, I mean, you can't just be stopping at Grammarly Business doesn't just apply, or you're not just applying it to service and support teams. I mean, it must have an application that extends beyond beyond service and support, right?
Absolutely. Grammarly Business drives a significant improvement in every department in an organization. And moreover, what we're starting to see now is the greater the share of employees that are on Grammarly Business inside an organization, the greater the benefit to that organization. So going from half of your employees to all your employees being on Grammarly Business is more than twice the value in the productivity because of all the friction it takes out of the system and all the increase in effectiveness it brings.
I love that. You know why? You know what that makes me think about? It makes me think about the kind of the forgotten child of service, which is like internal service. You know, the kind of the stuff that needs to happen inside a business and between sort of teams and people to produce these outcomes, these positive outcomes and resolutions for customers. And sometimes it's that internal friction is sometimes the thing that causes all the problems.
That's a great point, and that's exactly right. And we see that too, and that's what drives that. In addition to the problem you just described, there's a cultural issue. When you have inconsistent ways of communicating, whether it be the tone of the communications, but also the terminology in the communications and so on, you have a less intact culture, and you have a less on-brand culture internally, not just externally. That ultimately manifests itself externally. And so there are multiple effects that drive what we see in terms of impact. Now, I want to go back to your original question, which was there must be other applications than just customer support. So in sales, in sales, you see salespeople and the folks that they work with. You see the demand generation marketing teams that they work with. You see all of them be fundamentally more productive in terms of the number of proposals they're able to get out, the quality of those proposals, and so on. They're able to drive more through the sales machine without hiring a single head, just like in the support case that we talked about. In marketing, it's interesting. In marketing, it's a little different. In marketing, what we see is something that's very exciting. It is both the direct productivity improvement in marketing, particularly when you think about everything has to go through copy editors, or you think about the challenge in working with agencies and making sure they're on brand. You reduce all that friction with Grammarly. Right, and Grammarly Business, with our ability to have style guides in place, you can reduce a lot of those problems. You can increase that throughput. But the other thing is, think about how much effort and time and energy that marketers put into building their brand. All the investment that goes into brand, the love and sweat and tears that go into ideating, creating, designing a brand. the inconsistency in organizations, a challenge that's only rising as a result of all the trends we're seeing in the market and in the way that we get work done today versus the way we did pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
The challenges to delivering that consistent high quality brand experience is crushing to a marketing team that doesn't actually have control over the vast majority of the experiences that represent that brand in the market. Well, when the marketing, what we're seeing is marketing teams utilizing our style guide and our brand tones checker and things like that in order to actually drive consistency of the brand experience down into the organization, which for a marketer is just a breath of fresh air. And so not only do we see the business outcomes we talked about in those departments according to the metrics they're looking at, but you also see now a brand being able to actually flourish through all the touch points of an organization. And that is very cool.
Yeah.
Particularly if you have empathy for what so many marketers go through to come up with the best laid plans, only to get frustrated because they don't get executed consistently with their vision of how they should be executed. It's a very special thing.
Nice. So, yeah, no, that's very cool because I mean, I've worked in, well, not for a number of years, but I worked in corporates where you had kind of brand guardians that were they had the arbiters of the brand guidelines and everything else, and it was all quite a slow process having things checked whether they were on brand or not. But I guess you're saying that all this can be codified and automated and things, which is, and then therefore is leveraged and is more accessible for people, which is great. But I wanted to ask you if you could maybe give us like one or two examples of people that are, or firms that are leveraging your tech and approach and sort of what they're doing and how it's benefited them. I mean, just to bring it to life, because otherwise people go like, oh, nice, fancy new technology, brilliant, I'll have a go. But actually, it's like stories and impact, I think, that really help people understand the art of what is possible.
Sure, I'm happy to. We have a long list of these. Let me, one of the world's largest global CX management companies it actually uses Grammarly Business to improve the quality and efficiency of their customer support and customer facing teams.
Right.
And in their specific case, and they're operating in multiple countries around the world, we see a 17% improvement in satisfaction scores sitting side by side with a 22% increase in the number of tickets that those support teams are responding to. And the actual productivity improvement is actually greater than 22% because they're getting more first-time resolution on those tickets. So the actual absolute productivity is closer to 30%. We have a web hosting platform company that provides web hosting. They've seen that their productivity's gone up and their CSAT's gone up by 30%. Wow. We have companies, I can give you a few names too here. So we have companies like Atlassian and Zapier, right, that use us. And Zapier is a great example of a company who, as I mentioned before, really wanted to unify that company voice and bring the brand experience to the forefront in a very consistent way, recognizing the challenge that every company faces doing that. So they brought in Grammarly Business. They set up over 150 custom rules with our style guide. And what's really wonderful about that is, as you had alluded to earlier, is it doesn't create friction. There's no brand czar that's running around checking everything and stopping things from going out before they go out to make sure they're compliant with those rules, because it's seamlessly integrated into all the work people are doing as they're doing work. Those 150 rules consistently are applied as work is getting done in the workflows that everyone has in the company across every department to show up consistently into the market. And so as a result, now their employees are actually getting real time as they go to work, all the on-brand suggestions that brand czar would give without any of the friction whatsoever. And so Zapier is actually making pretty heavy use of Grammarly Business for that brand consistency objective. So those are a few examples.
No, I mean, there's a great and also impressive numbers, but also kind of I guess to your point from earlier is this. It adds real kind of hard numbers and, if you like, possibility to an area that's not often talked about and is often overlooked in terms of the impact that it has. And it's a bit like, ta-da, sometimes it's, you know, as is the case in most things, is sometimes it's the little things or even the big things that hide in plain sight that can, with small changes, you can actually have a really big impact.
Well said.
So, Dorian, is there anything else you'd like to kind of like add sort of about sort of Grammarly business that we've kind of missed out? Because, you know, before I wanted to ask you just to get your perspective on what you're seeing in the market as well. Well, before I ask that, is there anything else you want to add before I ask you kind of to put on your, I guess your market hat on?
So I'm obviously pretty excited about what we're seeing. I personally have, as a business leader, I know that I have not always shown up and helped my teams be successful by communicating in the most effective way, and I'm passionate about the impact that we can bring to individuals and to businesses by helping them communicate more effectively and do it in the context of getting work done, so they can do it faster, more efficiently, and more productively. When you see the numbers that we see, and that I've shared a few of today, and you see and you experience it as you have with our individual product, as our clients do with our Grammarly business, we have full conviction of the power of effective communication in improving the lives of individuals, but also in improving the performance of companies. And so we are doubling down our investment in growing our Grammarly business footprint with enterprises and organizations of all types. And we have a lot of investment into features and capabilities that are going to be coming out later this year around that. That includes more targeted capabilities for customer-facing teams like support, marketing, and sales. I gave you some of those examples before. It also includes greater analytics, and of course, we always do and always will take a very, very high standard to all things security and privacy oriented to show up in the best way possible in the market. So from that standpoint, there's major investment coming, and it's based on a combination of conviction, excitement, and a growing set of proof points of just how valuable this is for companies.
Awesome. No, it's exciting. I mean, it's like, this, I learn from it all the time, and this is one of the reasons I invited you on here, is because I know kind of like how how much value I get out of it. It doesn't make me necessarily a better writer; it makes me a more accurate writer, and it just helps the process. But what I wanted to do is also to step back from Grammarly, and because you're in amongst it and helping clients, work out how they improve their service and experience. I mean, based on what you're seeing and what they're telling you, and just kind of what you've been able to sort of like infer from what's going on around you, I mean, what do you think what's the future of service and experience look like when we've come through some pretty momentous times of the last, say, 15 months or so, and there's been a lot of changes, and we're not done yet either. I mean, so what do you think the future holds for us, and what do you think some of the key challenges are going to be ahead?
So clearly, the importance of customer experience has and is going to continue to define company performance overall, right? Customers have more choices, they have more information, they can switch more easily from one company to the next to meet their needs. And so delivering a great experience will continue to define overall performance of companies, their growth in the market, and so on. And that trend is not going to slow down. I think it's only going to continue and to accelerate. One of the things I think that is now becoming true that maybe was avoidable for companies in the past is that there is a growing need to move away from a fixed mindset of trade-offs across cost, quality, and speed to embracing a much more creative mindset and, frankly, growth mindset, if you will, where you are challenging the notion that there's a trade-off. Said differently, as customer experience continues to define business performance and the future of a company's growth, companies are going to have to move into a world where they are solving for the and of quality and efficiency, quality and productivity, quality and speed, rather than a trade-off mindset.
Right.
And I think I think that is a subtle but powerful change. And I think a lot of organizations are not set up to challenge that type of long-held belief. And I think that's going to be exceptionally critical.
I mean, that sort of requires them to take a more, if you like, systemic look at things, right?
Absolutely.
And so you have to almost look at things in a multi-dimensional kind of way, rather than in, I guess, a very linear way, which is, and also quite reductive way, which is sort of what happens in many cases now.
Well, I think that's right. And I think the other thing there that makes this particularly challenging for business leaders, and I feel this in my own day-to-day life. I certainly see it in colleagues at other companies, and you see it in the world, is particularly as we've navigated the last 2 years of the pandemic, and we've established new norms as to how we get work done, and new expectations from employees and customers as to how organizations are going to set employees up for success and are going to meet customer needs and deliver on a customer experience. When you think about all the trends, it's only become more challenging to actually to find the and on quality and efficiency, and to do that with consistency. And so now you've got a third element that you need to hit in the consistency and deliver on as an and, not an or, in the face of these challenges of more distributed workforces, more technology tools that are actually the drivers of the delivery of interactions. And by definition, written communication, both internal, as you'd mentioned, and external, through all this proliferation of applications. And so one of the things I think is really unique is on top of the and, there's the need for consistency in the face of almost the perfect storm of all the factors that hamper consistency.
Yeah.
In any point in time, right? And this is where I think also, particularly from a technology standpoint, because I spent a lot of time thinking about the technology standpoint, the lens needs to also change as to how do you think about technology investments. There's a lot of technology out there that I think, Grammarly included, but I'm not just talking about Grammarly. There's a lot of technology out there that is far more powerful than people realize, and a lot of new technologies that are very, very dynamic and are solving problems in very creative ways. They're not just the same version of the old technology. And I think one of the things that business leaders are going to have to do is not just rely on their IT departments, but to actually go out and learn about some of these themselves as well, to actually help them break down these traditional barriers of the past, the trade-offs on cost and quality, trade-offs on consistency, and do it particularly in light of this growing challenge of meeting those needs with today's workforce and today's customer demands. I think technology and learning about new technologies is going to be a place where business leaders that are succeeding are going to differentiate from business leaders that aren't, because they're going to understand that those technologies are about challenging status quos, not just about optimizing on the status quo.
Sure.
And in that, they're going to be able to set some new standards that other companies will have to follow or be left behind.
Nice, perfect. So, Dorian, you talked about this kind of, we find ourselves in an ever-changing environment right now, and I guess many people feel like they're in the maelstrom, but there's all this other sort of new, moving stuff, like changing working patterns, changing consumer preferences or customer preferences, changing kind of technology, so on and so forth. And so it's like everything seems like a moving part right now. But if I was to ask you to go give us some certainty to some of our listeners and say, like, from your experience, we know that most people that are involved or that come and listen to the podcast, they're involved in experience, they're involved in service, they're involved in support, and they are involved because they want to improve things. But sometimes they want to know where to start, right? Because you get all these moving parts, you're like going, I don't know where the first step should be. So what would you say from your experience? What would be your best advice to someone saying, I want to know what I should do maybe first or second in terms of wanting to improve the service or experience they deliver to their customers? I mean, what would you say?
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
And I empathize with everyone that is asking that question, because there are so many opportunities, so many levers to pull, and there is so much uncertainty about which ones are going to be the right ones tomorrow, right? Versus what we know today. It is a challenge that I empathize with. I think there are two places that I would start. I think the first is taking a look from the customer lens back as to what expectations have changed over the last 24 months. I mean, we saw in the first 5 months of the pandemic the evolution of online behaviors at a rate of the previous 5 years, right? And so I think there is take a step back and really almost with a clean piece of paper, ask yourself, what are the expectations of my customer today? And how can I actually get ahead of those expectations versus simply meet them? Because I think the trend line is going to continue.
Right.
And doing that from a clean sheet of paper would be step one. Step two, in my mind, would say, okay, in order to create the most frictionless environment, now that I'm not saying rigid, I'm saying frictionless, to meet the customer's needs, what would I expect to be in place? And I would take those two things and then take a look at the business system I have. And oftentimes we know our business systems and our business problems so well, they get in the way of these kind of clean sheet activities that I'm describing of the customer and then the ideal delivery, whether it be a support ticket flow or whether it be something bigger, and taking a look at that and then reflecting on what you have. And one of the things that I would put as a hypothesis for most listeners, or two hypotheses I put. The first is chances are it's not just about there's probably not like one more system you'd go out and buy and fix the problem. That's probably not going to happen. In fact, I think the majority, if not a significant percentage, the majority of folks in the support space, for example, I think believe that actually they have too many systems.
Yeah.
Right. And one more point system is actually getting in the way of improvement. So that would be a strong hypothesis of look at how to reduce. And then the second would be this, going back to my point of trade-offs, is the second hypothesis is if you take the lens of zero trade-off and it's an you'll come up with solutions that will be both more elegant and more powerful. And you're most likely going to have to be very explicit about that when you do your clean sheet approach and go back in, or else you will fall into the trap of, yes, but this is the way we've always done it. And so I just that clean sheet approach, I'd expect those two lenses as strong hypotheses to take as you go through it. And from there, I think everyone's situation is slightly different.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great advice. Really great perspective. So, Dorian, that's all I have for today. Apart from, the two questions I've always been asking for the last couple of years or so is my ongoing piece of longitudinal. I think that's right. I'm calling it longitudinal social research. Nobody's corrected me as yet. Where I've been asking people some sort of word association questions around this idea of punk CX. Now, the first question I have, and I warn you, I've got a list. I'm collecting a list of different words that people have come up with. I've got a list of over 125 different words that people have used to describe a more punk approach to customer experience. So I put the question to you, Dorian. What one word would you use to describe a more punk approach to customer experience?
Adaptable.
Adaptable.
I think the punk approach to CX, which I think gets back to the basics of what customer experience is all about, is how do we work quite simply back from our customer and the way what our customer needs, and that is an increasingly changing set of needs and expectations. And when you think about the importance of great employee experience to create great customer experience, and the need for systems to create great customer experience, and what you find is if your customers' expectations are changing and evolving rapidly, those other two things must be very dynamic and must be able to adapt very quickly. And the punk CX version of the world that gets back to the basics of how we win the customer is not to be necessarily right, specifically right at any given point in time, but it's to be able to constantly adapt and be creative and evolve based on input from the customer, input from employees, and constantly seeking new ways of doing things, even if that means at any given point in time we've kind of broken something. I think the punk CX approach wouldn't worry about that, because the primary ethos of adaptation around the customer and for the benefit of the customer would always trump the we got it right or we got it wrong at any given moment. We optimized or we didn't optimize at any given moment. So I think adaptable is where I would probably place my bets.
Awesome. Thank you. And so the second one, which is sort of it's sort of related to or builds on that one, is there a company or brand that you think epitomizes that sort of ethos, that sort of punk CX kind of ethos?
Well, I think, one of our customers that I've been pretty impressed with, and I'm impressed with the way I see them using our product and what they're trying to do and solve problem. I'm impressed with what I see in terms of some of the way they show up in the market, is Lucid. It's a research tech company based out of New Orleans. And it's a global company. And, I think that's a great example of an organization that, in trying to follow their customers and not move toward overly prescriptive approaches to solving the problem, at least in the context of our work with them, they applied Grammarly Business. And the idea was to, using the Grammarly Business core technology, was to be able to create a very dynamic and active way of bringing this brand experience to life through the support team, because they can constantly modify it, but do that in a way that was also very adaptable, because they could see what was working, where they can see what's working and what's not working. Mm-hmm. And I think as a result, they're kind of tapping into where I think a lot of other organizations need to, which is they're getting the quality and efficiency and consistency on top of a platform of adaptability. And that's a lot of words. That's a big word salad right there. But you don't usually get those things together. You don't typically get quality, efficiency, consistency standing on top of a foundation of adaptability. Like, that's a very unique combination. I think they're doing an exceptional job at pursuing exactly the strategy we talked about. And I think some of the things we're seeing, the way they use our technology, is great. And we know it's lifting their customer experience scores in the support department, as an example, because I know we spend a lot of time talking about that. But I think it also more broadly is setting standards that are going to continue to grow in terms of a consistent brand experience across multiple areas of the organization.
Perfect. What a great example. So Dorian, that's all I have for today. And I think I just want to say thank you for coming and talk to me about Grammarly Business. As I say, I've been a user of Grammarly personally, or for at least a premium version for at least a couple of years or so now, I think. And I've always been impressed by it, that there are no affiliate links and all this sort of stuff to do with this kind of podcast. I am just a fan of the Grammarly kind of products and how it's helped me with my writing kind of process. So, I don't need to put any disclaimers on that. But I just wanted to say thank you for coming to talk to me today and to explain a bit more about the wider applications, and also for sharing your insight and your experience with us and tell us a few stories. That's been great. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrian. I appreciate the time. Have a good day.
Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do, actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing kind of people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. One final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.